Good afternoon, and welcome to part 2B of Ernest Angley and his Doomsday Cult. Again, this is part 2B of the series Ernest Angley and his Doomsday Cult. We're going to continue part 2, and I'm going to expand on some of the topics that we discussed yesterday. This is why I would steer clear of Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral, in my opinion. It is almost exactly like pre-Islamic ancient Egypt under Pharaoh, both in terms of religion, Illuminati, satanic and occult practices, as well as the hatred of women and Jews. There is an unhealthy focus on Satan, the occult, angels, Lucifer, and the Illuminati. They talk a Jesus spiel, but a great deal of what they do includes classes in demonology. I'm not sure why you would need to take a class in demonology in order to participate in a religion unless you're trying to turn the candidates into Satanists. One of the things that Ernest Angley would say is that his is a ministry of man and angels, and he has a focus on healing and casting out demons. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. A ministry of man and angels, well, I suppose if Lucifer is involved and the devil and his angels, it certainly is a ministry of man and angels, isn't it? But it's not of God. It has nothing to do with the God of Israel. It sounds more like some kind of Gnostic deviation from truth. We don't pray to angels. We don't talk to angels. Those are things that man has nothing to do with, and that's God's business. We're not to be involved with those kinds of things. No. And this casting out of demons stuff that he does, I've heard many stories from children in which these children were told that God doesn't love them, that they're no good, that they're demon possessed, and what it has done is it turned children away from God because it was abusive in nature. I myself, and I said, I am a Jewish woman. When I decided that I really didn't want to have my children being any part of what that is, I wanted to leave and go away because of the violence and the murders and the just truly insane beliefs. And I wasn't allowed to leave. I was held against my will. There were times I was forcibly restrained. I had no access to a vehicle. I wasn't allowed to have a driver's license. And I wasn't allowed to go to work without a chaperone. So I was constantly followed and monitored. Even when I was working as a tax preparer, and another job I had was in retail, these groupies would come sit in the department where I was selling, and the store would let them. And they would be there the entire time that I was working. And I don't know if this was so that they could signal Frank and let him know when I was leaving. Sometimes he would pick me up. Sometimes I had to take the bus home, or one of the cult people would take me home. If I got on the bus, they got on the bus, if I wasn't riding with them. So I was monitored all the time, and that's not normal. Look, my dad in Saudi gets me a bodyguard. He's not that intrusive, okay? This is something else that is going on in Ohio. The woman hatred and the child hatred that Ernest Angley, Chris Mackamore, Bob Hoffman, and Frank Manjaris are involved in, both of my daughters have been subject to. They were both told numerous times that they were devil-possessed. I'll give you a perfect example of this. When my daughter was raped, she went to Ernest Angley, and Ernest Angley told her, well, he's not your natural father, so it's not really incest, is it? And he got saved, and by the way, you tempted him and you're devil possessed. This is what he told the victim of pedophilia. Now, this is on a recording my daughter made in the radio expose with 30 other members who used to attend there. I'm not making this up, and it verifies what's in the doctor's report and the therapist's report. I have news for you. Ernest Angley, Bob Hoffman, Chris McAmer, and Frank Manjaris. My daughter's never been devil possessed. She was traumatized, and if you don't know the difference between a trauma victim and somebody that's possessed, then you shouldn't even be in the business you're in. But in fact, you're the instigator and the performer of the traumas. Many women who have left there have been told they're mentally ill. Some women have had to endure being confined, either short-term or long-term, to psychiatric hospitals. Some women have been sent to prison without a trial and tortured, just to cover up for those Satanists in that religion. And I've got news for you. No Satan can put me in a prison. I obey the law, and I'm an observant Jew. No Satan can put me in a prison. Okay? But women who have left, who just wanted to leave and take their children, they were never going to say anything. They were just going to leave. They just wanted to go somewhere else, to a different church or to my home synagogue. And so instead, Angley keeps the kids with the abusers in his ministry, and his business lawyer represents the abusers free of charge. No regular woman can have $250,000 in legal fees to fight one of the richest televangelists in the United States. If they want your children, you're going to have a hard time in the legal system unless you have $250,000 for it. Okay? And while they have your child, they will tell your child, and I have the handwritten notes that members gave me saying that these men said those things, the pastors and Frank, and other women that have left that organization. When Bob Dyer of the Akron Beacon Journal did his interview, those women were also told, and their children were told, that they had mental spirits, or they were mentally ill, or they were devil possessed. I don't believe any of us are devil possessed. I have never been devil possessed. Another thing they do to harass you when you want to leave, which is abusive, that they will have everybody in the congregation have your phone number. They will give out your phone number from the pulpit, and either Angley or the associate pastors will advise other members of their congregation to phone this person because they're leaving the organization, and that person has to put up with months or years of threatening phone calls, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Bad language is used. During the divorce, I wouldn't even let my daughter answer the phone. I didn't let her speak on the phone for many years without me screening the calls first. And then, of course, they use that against you, and they say, you see, she's an overprotective mother. She shouldn't have custody of her child. She won't even let her talk on the phone without monitoring the conversation. Well, I had to. For the time that my younger daughter was with me during the proceedings until she was taken too, they would call on the phone, and here's my 6-year-old daughter answering the phone. They're using the C word on her. They're telling her her body will be hacked into pieces. They're telling her they're going to do all these nasty sex deeds. They used pornographic language. They called her the C word. They called her the B word. And they talked about cutting out her genitalia. They talked about cutting her belly open. And she had been one of the children that had witnessed Hannah Hill's stomach being cut open in the cathedral buffet when Shane disemboweled the girl he was stalking. And so, of course, this created a lot of emotional discomfort for my child, you can well imagine. And I wouldn't let her answer the phone without me being on the line. I just wouldn't. I would monitor, because I didn't want those people from that. And what kind of a church does this? What kind of a religious group does this? Would talk to a 6-year-old child with pornographic language, and oh, it was worse than gangster rap. It was horrible what they said. Then there were the death threats. I still get death threats, but I've spent the last 5 years tape recording them, and some of it relates to terrorism, and some of it relates to Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral. I have the tape recordings. I have over 600 hours of tape recordings at this point. Do not call and ask me if I have the insurance, and that if I don't convert to your religion, you will destroy my any job opportunity I have, or you will murder my daughters, or you will murder my mother, or you will murder me. I've got you with your identifying phone number and the tape recordings, and it can be traced. And I keep massive files of all of this stuff. And I encourage anybody that is being harassed in similar manners, if they're sending you mutilated animals through the U.S. Postal Service, if they're doing that to you, that is a federal felony. Make sure you video record everything and then transfer it to numerous flash drives to keep a copy. Tape record them. I know it's a horrible thing to have to do, but I've been running a tape recorder, and in addition I have security camera videos, and I have a GoPro camera that I wear at various times in order to protect myself from people that are harassing me in this manner. And it's going to the International Human Rights Courts. I've got in 3 courts overseas. I've got 1 case in federal court, and I have a case coming up for state court related to these crimes. What they are doing is illegal. I heard yesterday and today, I was looking online to put together the information for this video series, and I heard a young lady by the name of Poore, and she used to attend the Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral, and she did an expose with Richard Rossi and talked about a book she wrote, Demon Girl to God's Girl. Okay, never met her, don't know who she is, but because she used to attend there, I thought I will listen to what she said. And in this expose, it's another radio show, in addition to the one with my own daughter and 30 ex-members talking about the sex abuse of children there in the drug running. Poore, from minutes 18 or 16, listen especially to where it starts at the 16-minute mark going up to the 22 or 23-minute mark in the recording that radio expose. In this expose on radio, she says that there is a drug dealer who attends Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral. He had quit going, and he got her hooked on cocaine and had sex with her, and then dumped her and went back to the ministry, if you can call it a ministry, and to support her drug habit, then she turned to prostitution. Well, I know for a fact that there are girls that were kept there, that they didn't have a mother, and thank God not my daughters, but we're in the process of seeing if drugs have been given to them. There won't be any drugs going on with my children, because you're going to have a mother who's coming after you with the law if my children are using any kind of drugs, if they're being exploited. I waited over 18 years for them to come back home. When I was still attending there, one of the associate pastors told me that he was the largest drug runner in the Midwest, and that I can't tell anybody or harm will come to me and my family. They give these children drugs so that they can't get out of the ministry. This is the same thing Iran did under the Ayatollahs. They would give them heroin, get them hooked. And the poor people, what could they do if the Ayatollah Khomeini wants them to get a protest? They don't get any heroin unless they make a protest and burn the American flag. And they control them through the drug addiction. If you get them hooked and then you supply the source of the drugs, then you exploit them. There were many people that were business people in the community that said to me, oh, we have sex with this young girl and this young girl and that young girl and that boy all the time. And that's while I was still attending there. And I said, what? And they said, well, this is a joke. This whole thing is a joke. It's a bordello. These people traffic children. Didn't you know that? So I was the idiot one there. I was the one who didn't know everything that was going on until later. And over the years, I've received so many of these stories from ex-members. And I can't understand when I went to the authorities over and over again, every time one of these children sent me an email, I would contact law enforcement. Why were they not protected from this kind of behavior? I know for a fact that male children are human trafficked out of there and female children are sex trafficked. And we're in the process of looking at RICO statute violations for this. And some of the people that go there that have private meetings with Frank, Bob Hoffman, Ernest Angley, and Chris McAmer are members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Cleveland, Ohio, and some of them have gone to prison for terrorism. So this other woman who did the interview with Bob Hoffman and the other women who said, Angley says any woman leaving here has mental spirits, any child has mental spirits. If they love the mother, the child has mental spirits, and the mother has mental spirits. Ernest Angley says a demon is over you, and they teach the children to be afraid of you. Now, I have this in 2 newspaper articles. I have a recording from when I talked to my daughter, and she told me she was afraid of me. In the meantime, social services said I had never neglected or abused my children. First, the cult abused them, and then when they went into the social service and got their help, the cult interfered in another state with my children being protected in the social services. And Kim Comer was giving my 10-year-old daughter marijuana to smoke while she was protecting her. That doesn't sound like protection to me. I have eyewitnesses that have given me written letters stating members of Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral called the social services offices, called them, made up stories about me, and then my daughter ended up abused in the foster care, and the very social workers were doing the abuse and giving her drugs because of the Ernest Angley connections. This is how they stalk. This is why there are cases in human rights courts for me and other women now about this. Because in the United States of America, if you try to leave a religious group and they hold you against your will and they rape your child and they beat you and they choke you so bad you go to the hospital and they tell you that you're mentally ill and they tell other people you're mentally ill, which is slander and libel, and you can't get the authorities in the town to help. You can't get the police to help. But now the stories are coming out. All of these women who left were told, other people were contacted and said, don't have anything to do with this person. She's possessed. She doesn't want God. She doesn't have God in her life. She's possessed. No, that's not true that I'm possessed. It's not true that I'm mentally ill at all. And I have the psychiatric evaluations to prove it. Thank you very much. But I would never hurt my children. I have never hurt my children, and they have no reason to fear me. But I know why they fear me, because you've threatened them. They're not afraid of their mother. They're afraid you're going to hurt them like you did before. And I've got the proof because both of my daughters talked all about it, so you better leave them alone. Don't ever go around them. Don't call them. Don't talk to them. Don't send men to have sex with them. Get out of their lives. Get your network away from them so that they can come home to the mother who can help them start their life over in a wholesome way and a loving way and a normal way. This Ginger Poore talked about the drug dealing going on out of that group, talked about prostitution. I know for a fact that there is sex trafficking and human trafficking that takes place there because of the military arrests and the FBI arrests of men who were there for that, for those crimes. So it's much more sinister than even Ginger Poore says. It's more sinister. It's a tip of the iceberg, Bob Dyer's expose. Angel used to talk to the young children about eating ice cream. And the way he would say it, he would say, don't you just in the summer love to have a delicious ice cream and we can hand it to you and you can lick that ice cream? And it creeped me out at the time, and I thought, what is this guy, a pervert? He's a pervert. He's not a moron, he's a pervert. But then the children started sending me handwritten letters and emails saying this person said he loves me and he wants me to do oral sex with him. And these were associate pastors. I have those emails and letters from more than one child talking about being beaten and sexually abused. I have the evidence, and that's coming in part 6 or 7 of the series, where I'm going to post all this. So that I'm only focusing on your deeds, dude. I don't care what your theology is. I wouldn't want to hear it if you're acting like that, and you have done this. They're child and woman haters. The other thing, Angley told some of the little girls, you have a figure just like my wife had. Why would you tell a 10-year-old child she has a figure like your wife? What are you, a pervert? In my opinion, you are. I think you're very dangerous to children. I think that whole religious outfit and anybody attending there is a danger to children. Angley doesn't encourage or allow his staff to get education. They're expected to have the minimum. He often works them without pay. And he has a group that he runs just like Boko Haram over in Africa. It's like Boko Haram. If a woman gets a job and she's making $90,000 a year, his groupies will find a way to wreck it so that she gets fired. If she has a waitressing job and she's making $50,000 a year, they'll come sit in your section, not tip you, take up all your time, and you'll get fired. If you have business clients, they'll break into your home, get your client list, call your clients, and you won't have an income. If you have business forms, they'll steal them, and then you're afraid, God forbid, they're doing business and representing themselves as my company when they're not. They'll have people follow you around and tell you they're going to destroy you and they're going to annihilate you. Those are Greek demons, by the way. The annihilator and the destroyer, Abaddon, that's a Greek demon. And many of the churches have that. They don't have God. And so I know they don't have God at Grace Cathedral. I was living holy. I still live holy. I've never been an alcoholic or a drug addict. I don't use street drugs. Have not used street drugs. Don't molest children. I'm not one that suffers from severe mental illness. I do have PTSD, but there's no severe mental illness. And so I think that the people that need to have the mental evaluations are Frank, Angley, McAmer, and Hoffman. And with the sexual molestation of Brock Miller, I think there are definite mental health issues going on, not with Brock, but with the people that covered for Angley after he hurt that poor man. Now, it's very typical of people that have been sexually molested, especially children, but this would include Brock Miller. If these kinds of things have happened to people and they're able to get away from the abuser, quite often they will drink or use a drug or engage in rampant sexuality for a while until it balances out, because they've been controlled and they've been abused, and so it kind of throws the emotions and the judgment off kilter for a while. Those people are not doomed, they're not dirty, they're not rejects, and they're not deceived. Bob Hoffman, Frank Manjaris, Chris McAmer, and Ernest Angley, you are doomed. You are doomed for the rape and molestation of children and for blaspheming God's name in satanic ritual, telling a man to get naked so you can anoint him. Examining genitals, and there are many, many, many people that said genitals were examined. When you know this is the practice, how would you think that it was just Brock Miller? No, these things are done for very wicked reasons. The other thing I'd like to talk about is they never gave me anything. They have repeatedly stolen things, and then a university also stole things. But the occult games, the witchcraft games that are played, some of it is Jerusalem syndrome. Some of it is turning a regular Torah or a regular Bible into a satanic Bible, which is also a reference to how they convert people. They do gaslighting. This is witchcraft as well. just before I divorced Frank, I had taken a part-time job, and I had the younger daughter with me because he didn't want her, other than to abuse her, molest her, and threaten her. And I had to keep her with me 24/7 because I didn't have anybody that I could trust to watch her. I was protecting my child from this. I would go to work and come home. All of the furniture in my home had been moved, and it would shock me, and I wouldn't understand why that had happened. I would bake a cake before I went to work, thinking, well, we'll have some people over tonight, and I'll share the cake after dinner, and we'll have a social event. I'd come home, and all of these people would tell me, you didn't bake a cake today. Maybe something's wrong with your mind. I know you've been under a lot of stress recently, but there's no cake. I started doing things like hiding the cake boxes and putting time and dates on them, writing on the inside, and folding it and putting it to my purse if I baked a cake or such. And then when I would come home and they would tell me that, I would be able to pull out the cake box as evidence that yes, I did, and here's the date and the time on it. So what kind of game are you playing with me? That's called gaslighting. I would put my talit on a hat stand or the corner of the mirror and hang it, my talit, very nicely in the bedroom. I would come home and it would be crumpled up and thrown on the floor, crumpled up and thrown onto the sofa. And they would tell me that's how I left it. It wasn't how I left it. My daughter was told, and I was told, that we could never speak Hebrew or Arabic or French or Spanish around anybody in the church. When the CPS got involved, I had asked them to protect my child. Instead, in Iowa, they turned into further cult groupies to molest and psychologically intimidate my child. She was forbidden to speak Hebrew, Arabic, or French. She was not allowed to study Torah. The police were called on us during a supervised visit because I said when the children of Israel left Pharaoh and Egypt, God drowned the Egyptians in the Red Sea, and the Red Sea closed upon them, and the children of Israel went through on dry ground. Kim Comer, the same woman who was giving my child marijuana, called the police and ended the visit, so my child is afraid now that if she talks to her Jewish mother that the police are going to get her. This is the influence that Ernest Angley, and I have the evidence of this because there were members of his religion signing off on court documents along with the judge as if they were members of the court from another state, from the state of Ohio. That's a RICO statute violation. They aren't members of the court. What were they doing? Criminality is what it was. Okay? Here's an example of the kind of witchcraft they use. It relates to role-playing games. The congregants are told to pick a Bible character and act out whatever that Bible character did. At one time, Frank was told that he could be Abraham, and apparently they don't understand that Judaism is not the bondwoman and Sunni Islam is not the bondwoman. If you tell an Arab that they're a slave, they're really going to hate your guts for that. If you tell a Jewish person that, we're not going to like you a lot. Okay? And your use of Scripture is wrong. The sinning churches are the bondwoman. It's when you do willful sins. If you commit adultery and you break up a marriage, you're the bondwoman, honey, not me. If you give a child narcotics or rape a child, you're the bond woman or the bond man. You're in bondage, not my child. If you rape my child, you are possessed. My child is not possessed. You got it? Understand that? I'm for the victim. I don't care. God isn't forgiving you. He's not forgiving you for what you did to my children. So just get over it. Leave them alone. And learn your theology. You apparently don't know any of it, and I'm Jewish and I know better than you do. And so if you're going to give into the evil inclination and have an animal lust soul, by your willful sins, you are the bond person, and the wages of sin, as you say, is death. Eventually you will die, because you can't do this to people. You can't, in committing the willful sins, and then you excuse yourself saying, well, Jesus gave me permission to do this. Not if he was a Jewish rabbi, he didn't. No, he didn't. If he was a Jewish rabbi, he never said that. Or else he's not a Jewish rabbi. I'm sorry. You can't have it both ways. So get that straight. But anyway, so they told Frank he was Abraham. At another time, they told him he was Jacob. And he said, you don't want your wife anymore. So since her adoptive father is Saudi anyway, you're Hagar, you're Hajara. And she's Jewish. She doesn't believe like we do. She finds fault with our teaching. So get rid of her. And the woman you've been having sex with, marry her instead. Frank's name is Frank. He's not Abraham. Abraham died over 3,000 years ago. His new wife isn't Sarah. She's a mistress. She's an adulteress that married him. And they're still living in adultery because God doesn't accept it. I don't want him back. I will never accept him back. He broke the covenant. I don't have to have him back. I'm free from him. Thank you. Keep the trash. But I'm taking my children with me when I go. So they excused it. He said, well, I was like Abraham, or I was like Jacob. No, you weren't. Abraham married Sarah and Hajara in order to produce holy seed. And Isaac was the child of the promise for the chosen people, but Ishmael received promises too, that he would be the father of many princes. God doesn't hate Ishmael. He hates Esau. Ishmael is not Esau. There is a difference. You know who Esau is, don't you? Churches that rape children and have the Illuminati or the Satan. Churches that practice willful sins. Churches that have that woman Jezebel in their teaching. They eat meat with blood. They have images and idols in their church. They rape children. And so it doesn't surprise me that the many people that have helped to harass me come from Jesuit, Muslim Brotherhood, Roman Catholic, and Greek Orthodox and televangelist backgrounds. Because the sins you're doing are all sins they commit. So of course they would stick up for you. Of course they would help you against me. But I live holy. So you're totally out of line in all of the harassment and your persecution that you have done. And not just me, but these 30 ex-members talked about it. Ginger Poore talked about it. You have the trail of bodies along the way. It's not just Cassandra Blondheim and Hannah Hill that were murdered in 1999, which gave me the window of opportunity to escape with my children. Otherwise, we probably would have died too. They were beating us that badly. They were depriving my children of food. I had to make clothing for my daughters out of pink and white striped bed sheets because Frank wasn't supporting us, but he had enough to run up the credit cards to buy presents for his mistress that he's married to today. He wasn't supporting me. He had enough to support that cult, but he wasn't buying food for my children. I bought the food. They're just so abusive. And all these other people that came forward with their stories were not all wrong. So the other role-playing games they do, of course, is the gaslighting. And then there are the groups of people who will say, well, you have to go back to Frank. And then they'll do a role-playing game to try and make it seem that Frank is a Jew, Frank is Abraham, Frank's Jacob, Frank's Peter, Frank's Paul. Frank is Frank. And I'm not going back to him. I don't want him. I'm not Hagar. I'm not coming back to him. And if I were Hagar, I don't want him. He's not Abraham. He's nothing. He's not even Jewish. He's not Arab. And he's not a Bible character, no matter what they say. It's like the same people that have this mentality, oh, King David committed adultery. When that other loser, Jimmy Swaggart, was seeing the prostitutes, they compared him to King David. This is satanic Bible, okay, that they're talking. Those people are satanic. Jimmy Swaggart wasn't David. David never saw a prostitute. David married his women. No comparison. But they'll take some portion of Scripture, assign the Bible character title to a person, and turn it into a Dungeons and Dragons spiel to cover up for satanic and Luciferian works. I'm not falling for that crap. That's called Jerusalem syndrome. If you really think you're a Bible character and that God gives you permission to commit sins based on that Bible character's story to try to justify your wickedness, then you miss the whole point of why God put that in there. He put that in there not so you can copycat the bad stuff, like rape a child and then tell her it's like Japheth, the bad judge. No, it's not. If my child dies, I'm coming after you and your kids, dude. You don't touch my children. I'll come after you with a baseball bat, with an iron crowbar. I'll come after you in court. You don't touch my children. And then use Bible stories to inflict injury on their emotions. You need a psychiatrist. This is the kind of satanic crap that is going on there. It's a criminal organization. It's not a church. This is what you have to begin to understand. Now, there was another televangelist that came out a few years ago, and I can't remember his name now, but there was another one, and you can look it up online. He was actually running weapons on his private jet and arming Hamas. A televangelist. And he's a famous one that claimed to love Israel. Wow. What deception. How wicked. And Ernest Angley, he had his own messages before 9/11. Many years before 9/11. 3 or 4 years before 9/11, one of the last things I heard him say, and I said, I'm never listening to this man again. He said, there are going to be rockets of miracle power taking off from this platform and shooting down the stars of heaven, the way he says it. The problem with this, people, is that that's from the book of Daniel. And that's from the prophets as well. It would be a Greek that, like the Greek king that tried to kill us, and Judah Maccabee led the rebellion. You start shooting the stars out of the sky with your miracle rockets of power. What you're talking about is mass murdering Jews. That's what that was about. This is why they attempted to murder me and my 2 children. Because it's more of that insane Bible-playing rhetoric, role-playing games. The other thing Ernest Angley said is, if God wants me to fly a plane into a burning building, I'm going to do it. That's exactly what I would do. 3 years later, 9/11 took place. What do you make of that? I was the Jewish woman sitting there, and I said, and of course I had an army background. I had served in the U.S. Army in the 80s. And I did, my MOS was a linguist, but I was trained to do signals intelligence. I wasn't in long, but during the time I was, I got some good training. So when Ernest Angley talked about rockets of miracle power taking off from the platform and shooting stars out of the sky, I said, it seems to me like he's talking to members of the Quds Brigade. He's talking like a Hezbollah operative. And if I didn't know better, I'd think he was giving terrorists directions in the form of a Christian sermon right from his stage. And these are New World Order terrorists. These are not Sunni Muslim terrorists, my friends. Some of them may have had an Islamic title. That may have been their upbringing. Most of these terror attacks have been the Jesuits with the New World Order and the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, CARE, and Hezbollah. And I believe that Ernest Angley was giving warfare directions in his ministry, and I intercepted his signals intelligence. I didn't like it because the stars, of course, are Jewish people. God said to Abraham, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven. So why would Ernest Angley want to shoot the stars out of the sky if they're like Abraham's offspring through Sarah? Because the Jesuits don't like two people. They don't like the dirty Jews. That's me. And I'm not dirty, thank you, not really. And they don't like Sunni Muslim Arab kings. And they don't like Arab world leaders because they must do away with them for the sake of his modern-day Solomon's temple. My mother is Jewish, and my father is from Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You will not hurt the Arab princes and kings in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, or Bahrain, or Dubai, Al-Amarati, Al-Mutahira. Don't touch them. Don't touch my Jewish people. Don't touch my own two daughters. Don't do it. When the Bible talks about the stars going dark in the heavens, parting like a scroll, understand that is something very grave and very evil. Do not attend, in my opinion, the Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral and his Doomsday cult. Some people have lost their eternal souls in it. Some have committed terrible crimes and they're not able to get out, or they will be exposed for their crimes. Thank God I never did. You will not blackmail my daughters in this manner. You will not human traffic them. That's the other thing. Some of the tape recordings that I have made over the last so many years, I get the phone calls and a man will say, your children were taken in order to pay a debt. No, you're not going to take my children to cover a debt, and I know you did, and I've got you on tape recording. You let them go. You let my children go, and you send them back to their mother now. And I'm not done, because by the time I'm done posting my evidence and going to international human rights courts, you guys will have been had. Interpol may be coming for you. I'm not playing games. You're guilty of crimes against humanity. You're very wicked. And I pray that anybody listening here understands exactly the kind of thing that is going on at Ernest Angley's Grace Cathedral. He is very abusive. Bob Hoffman, Chris Mackamer, Frank Manjaris, they're just as wicked as Angley is. Avoid Ernest Angley and his Doomsday cult, because it is Ernest Angley and his Doomsday cult, and you don't want to be doomed. For all the victims that this man has hurt, the families he's destroyed, the children that have been raped and molested and abused, that experienced debauchery, the children that were misled and ended up promiscuous. I'm telling you, you can be free from all of that, and I'm going to share with you how. In part 8 of the series, the final series will be what you can do to be restored and how you can get out of that cult and never have to go back. And I'm going to detail carefully the steps that it will take. It's not as hard as you think. It was hard for me because I was one of the first that barely escaped with her life. And I believe with all my heart, if the Arab sheikhs had not helped me, neither my children or I would still be alive today. But I am not going to allow that cult to bring any more harm to either of my daughters, to my Jewish people, or to my Arab family. And I'm never coming back. You have to get that through your head. I don't want to be part of your group. I don't want to be the next one in line to be famous. I don't want to be famous at all. I want to be married to a real man. He'll never do that to me and my children. You don't get to break us and then have the solution to fix us. What you need to do is sell your plane and make financial restitution for our injuries so that I can live with my children in comfort for the rest of our lives, so that I can clean up the broken mess you left. Because my children, no matter what happened to them, are good and pure. And I love you, and I want you back with me. I've cried every day for 18 years, and when I heard the stories of what you had been through, I honestly didn't know, but I figured it out as I heard other people. And those children that would send me letters have cried every day over the letters I received. Many children beaten by the person who stays in the cult. And the ones who get out, they take your children and they hurt them until they don't love you or care about you, and they don't want you in their life. You're just like Pharaoh. Bob Hoffman, Frank Manjaris, Chris McAmer, and Ernest Angley, you're like Pharaoh. And just as the Lord God Almighty with his own hand broke Mitzrayim, the angel that ruled Egypt, he's going to break your Lucifer. He's going to put him in the pit, and the maggot you worship is only a man. And you're going to pay for the lives you destroyed and the children you hurt. Because God has heard their cries. You can threaten to kill me all you want, and you have many times. You're not going to be able to kill me. I've got you on the run. I've got over 500 hours of tape recordings. I got letters. I got evidence. And I took it out of the United States. You're being put on trial in an Arab country, too, for your crimes. I've shared this with 100 or more embassies, so when you make your trips overseas for your crusader cause, whatever it is you do overseas, before you even go to apply for your visas, you better know they've got the files on you. I gave it to the ambassadors and the leaders of those countries. Know what you're up to. You're not going to prevent me from going to Israel and Arabia. My people live there in both countries. You're not going to keep my children from me to manipulate me and threaten me and wreck my job opportunities and interfere with my life and steal my stuff anymore. You're a criminal organization is what you are. You're wicked. Avoid Ernest Angley and his Doomsday cult. Avoid them. Your children are counting on you to keep them safe. Join me for series part number 3 next time, okay?